What up everybody, Zach here. Welcome back to Case Digital. In this video, we're going to start talking about Python strings. Primarily, we're going to go over the three main ways that you can create a Python string, some common ways to edit or manipulate strings, and some of the most common functions that people will probably use and that you yourself will probably use in creating a string. So, without further ado, let's hop right in and start coding. We're going to start talking about Python strings today, and we're going to jump right in, and we're going to kind of pick up where we left off in our last video when we were talking about Python data types, particularly the number data types. And we're just going to kind of use that same file, and we will kind of talk about strings. So, like I mentioned before, a string is basically textual data. And that's just basically what Python determines as a string, is all the textual data. And that textual data could be any number in it, it could have characters, it could have a whole sentence, it could have a paragraph. I mean, it's just textual data. And essentially, you know, like we talked about last time when we had this variable, C, we just assign that string 5.5. And that just, it has a number in it, and that's just it. And this is one way, and one of the most common ways that probably strings are created, is with these single quotes. That's essentially what makes it a string. Now, you can also create a string using double quotes, and I can do the same thing, 5.5 here, and if I print that out, if I print out C, type Python, data type numbers, and that's going to show you just 5.5. And if we print out the type of that, if we come in and do print type of C, it'll show you that 5.5 is of class string. So now I'm going to create another variable and do a D equals, and then just do the same thing, 5.5. We'll just copy this, and we'll just do D here, just to show you that they equal the same thing, and you can see that they're both the same. So you might be asking yourself, so Zach, when to use, you know, the double quotes for this versus the single quotes? Well, it all depends. Now, like I said, strings are just textual data. So if I started typing something like, my house is awesome, I could do that. But the reason I might switch to using double quotes rather than single quotes is, what if it said, Jim's house is awesome? Now you'll notice that this looks like a string, but if I switch this to single quotes, you notice that we get our editor here helps us and tells us that, hey, look, there's an issue here. Now if I try to run this, I'm going to end up with an error, a syntax error, because it's saying that it only counted Jim as the string, and then we get this weird other thing, and then another, quotation mark there. And so that's when you would use, that's primarily when I and most people would switch to double quotes, is when you have a single quote within the actual string, and that's when you would kind of more do double quotes than single quotes. But also it could depend on your preference, because some people, they like to do a quote, like, if say you're doing a quote of something, like you're doing a book quote in your program, and it said, she said, now my spelling is not the best, so please don't judge me there, and do this. Well, now if I do the same thing, I'm going to get another error, because again, we get that same situation. It's only going to count this as the string, and then we get this mix match with these. So another way that you can handle this is what's called an escape character. So we're basically just going to do a backslash by our one that we want to be the quote, and then another backslash by this one. And now this will basically make a string with those inside of it. So if we print out C, run it, we can see that it says she said, and then it gives us the actual quote values in there, even with our single quote for that. And so that's two of the three ways that you can create a Python string. Now, the other way is through triple quotes. So we'll just keep D. We'll do triple quotes, 1, 2, 3. And as you can see, it started already, my editor kind of already did this, but I'm going to do a space, and then just so that I can know where all these triple quotes end. But primarily when you do the triple quotes, this is used for doing like multi-line strings. So something like, hi, my name is Jim. What is your name? Now if we print out D, which we already have it saying it's going to print out, we see that it says, hi, my name is Jim. What is your name? And it kind of kept the same format. Now, what's interesting about these is if I were to do, like, I wanted these to line up. Say I was like, oh, well, I don't like the look of it in my code, but I want it to line up. And I do that. Well, actually, when you're doing that, you're adding more spaces to the string. And so when you do this, it's actually going to push it all the way over. And so when you do strings like this with multi-line, you just kind of have to let them fall. Like once you hit enter, you just have to start typing where it is. And that's there's some tricks you can do to break strings up, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, or add stuff to strings. But essentially, those are the three main ways: either the single quote, the double quote, or the triple quotes, or the triple double quotes, I guess is what you would call it, to actually get the multi-line string. So now, let's talk about some operations or things that you can do. Like I mentioned, that you could split strings up and do stuff with strings. So what if I had a string that said, so we have D. Now what if I did a variable E, or let's do a variable response because that's more, equals my name is Zach. Now when I do this, I'm going to reset this here. So when I do this, look it up again, it runs, it shows you that that's my string. Now, when I talk about adding stuff to it, what I could do is I could just say D equals D plus response. And as you'll notice when I do this, it tacks on, when you do for strings, when you do the plus, it basically what's called concatenating. Basically, you're taking one string and just hooking it on the end of the other one. So you'll notice, like my string here it doesn't start with an extra space. But when you come down here and look at, the end of this, it says, hi, my name is Jim. What is your name? Question mark, my name is Zach, and they're tight. So if I wanted to fix that, there's two ways I could do that. I could either go into response, and I could just do that, and that'll fix it, just to show you. Boom, that fixes it. Or I could do this, where I come in and I do so this is basically how you add onto a string. And if I did that, you'll see that it's the same result. I get that extra space. And so that's what's called concatenating and adding onto strings. And that you'll use a ton. I use it every day in my professional work environment when I'm dealing with Python and textual data. Like I use this all the time. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that you can access certain parts of a string. So for instance, let's remove all this. Say I get this big old long string back, or maybe I just get my response back, and I only want to parse out, the first two characters, or I want to get out the word my, the first word my. So if I wanted to do that, what I could do is I could do print response, and I could do the square brackets, and then do 0, 2, 3. So 0:3. Now when I do this, that prints out my. So what that means is, what this is saying is, I want to take this whole string and I want to get starting from character 0, which is right here. So that's the one thing to point out in Python. Things start in 0 base, meaning they go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to the end, rather than starting at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so one thing I can show you really quick is I can print out the length of this. And this is another handy function for strings, is if you want to know how long a string is, you can say, hey, give me the length. So len, parentheses, the string variable, or just the string. And then when you run it, it'll tell you that, hey, your string is 16 characters long. And so when I go through this, I can say, hey, I want to get the first word. So I start from 0, the 0 character, which is this one, and go Basically it's 2, because what it's saying is I want to go to this one, but I don't want you to include this one. When you put it at the end, it says don't include it, but I want you to stop here. And so that will give me these 2, if that makes any sense. So basically you're going to start at 0, then go to 1. Oh, I guess this should have been 2. Yeah, sorry. So it would have gone to here, and the last one it would have gone to here and said go to here, but only include these ones. Whereas now I just changed it where it says go to here and now only include these ones. So the last one tells you the index to go to, but don't include. So this one includes it. This one says go to that one, but don't include whatever's there. So if I would have done 4, let's do 4. Yeah, this should go to n and give you n. My space n. So you see that it went to this one, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So just go there, but then only include this stuff after it. So that's one way with lists, or you can do the same thing with lists, but this for strings, and we'll talk more about lists later. But with strings, this is one way to access it. Now, what's interesting is you can also do it reverse. So in this syntax, I could also say this would mean the same thing, means just from the 0 one. But if I want to go to reverse, what I could do is I could say I want to go from -4. So let's get Zach. So if this is -1, if you count backwards from the end, say that this is -1, this will be -2, -3, -4, -5. So let's get -5, and then let's just say go to the end. So the colon, and if you leave it blank, it just means go the rest of the way. And so what we can do is if we do that and print it, you'll see that it says Zach and this. Now, it's interesting to know that when you go backwards, it does start from 1, but when you go forward, it does go from 0. So just keep that in mind. So now if I just wanted to go just get Zach, what I could do is go -5, colon, and then -1, and that should leave off the period and give us Zach, and as it does. So these are ways that you can manipulate strings and or just extract certain data out of it. Like I mentioned before, and these are the most common, like the common functions that you'll use is like length and this and the index operator or the access operator. One thing I mentioned in our previous video that I did with the help and the dir built-in functions is with strings you can do dir and then you can do str. You say, well, what functions do strings allow us to be able to perform? And if we reset this, and then we run this, all right, you can see, so if we skip all the underscores, you can see there's the capitalize, there's case fold, center. You can see all these attributes that we can use. And most of these are all functions, like capitalize a value. So if we went into, say we make a string, say let's do message equals hi, and we want to print our message. Well, when we do this, you'll just see hi. Well, now what if I do message.capitalize? It actually capitalized the H. So that'll just capitalize the word for that string. There's also other things that you can do. So like say, let's do response. Let's mess with response. Let's say I want to count the number of letters, a specific letter. So let's just say I'll do response.count, and I want to count the M's. If I print this, you'll say that there's 1. Now, wait a minute, Zach. In my name is Zach, there are 2 M's. And you're right. But I asked it for the lowercase m, and there's only 1 of those. Now, if I switch this here to be my name is Zach, and I did this, you would see that it says 2. And so basically, this will just go through the whole string and count the number of characters that you're looking for, or count what you're looking for. Now, if I wanted to, I could say, does response have the name Zach in it? And as it says, it does. There's 1 Zach in there, or there's one basically substring named Zach that's in this longer string. There's also some other cool functions that you can do. Is you can do .lower. And what this will do is lower the whole sentence. So you can see if I switch this back to capital M, it now prints out lowercase m, lowercase, and with a lowercase z. And so that's lower. Now I can make everything uppercase by just doing upper. And now it's just my name is Zach with everything uppercase. That is basically some of the most common things. I do want to touch on this one. I'm going to do a whole other video on this one, but I want to touch on this. If you wanted to, say you get this long string and you had, maybe it's like an Excel document that you got a string format in, and maybe you got this Excel document in or whatever, and it's got it's a comma separated value list, right? Well, how do you kind of get all the individual parts that are separated by the commas? Well, one thing you can use that string variable's split operator. Now, split alone will just basically split on spaces. So now, in my response messages, there's 1, 2, 3 spaces. So if I do this, you'll see it now creates what's called a list, and it basically gives me all the individual strings that are split on spaces. Now, if I, like I mentioned before, do commas, and I do split, you can see that just gives me one. It gives me, it returns a list, but it's just that whole string still. Now, what if I did split comma? Now you see it gives me back the way I had when they were spaces. So that is just another powerful one, and we can do a whole video on split itself, because there's a lot of cool different things that you can do with it. I love it. It's really awesome to do. So I would just play with that. Go and do the dir function on str and see what other functions there are, and see what you can do and what strings you can come up with. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the chat below, and I'll be able to. I'll make sure I check that and look and kind of respond to those questions that you may have. Thank you again for taking the time to watch this. Please hit the subscribe button below, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and keep on coding.